Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach, and today we have with us Fred Herbert, who is the founder of Fred Herbert Consulting Group. Fred, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Mike. I'm glad to be here. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Well, hey, I love just getting to know people and learning about their business, and then more importantly, learning how you are able to transform and help your clients. So give me a little bit of background on yourself and then what led you into coaching.
Well, it started many years ago. I had my own business when I was 21. I started a printing business, and I sold that when after about 14 years, and then got into some other businesses and had my ups and downs in life, but eventually got back into the printing business as a quality manager for a company that I helped them win the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, and that kind of launched me into the quality industry, and I became a Lean Six Sigma black belt and just got into all the tools that's used in quality, and decided about 10, 12 years ago to start my own consulting business. And I've done some small businesses I've worked with, and I've done last 5 years I've done a lot of work with ExxonMobil. So a wide range of consulting projects, but it's been quite a journey.
So do you currently still work with some of the super large and some of the super small, or have you found lately that you focus on one specific type of business?
Well, I still do a lot of consulting with kind of mid-size companies, but I've been working toward try to get between books and audio programs and that kind of thing. I'm trying to get to where I can help the smaller business that you really can't afford to hire, an expensive consultant, but yet I can provide some of the tools and strategies to the smaller businesses. So that's kind of where I'm trying to move my consulting now, is where I can help the smaller businesses.
Well, you know what I like about that is the businesses that are small to medium sized that you do work with, they are able to draw from your experience with the large firms, because you think about these companies that hire the McKinseys or the Deloitte & Touche or the big consulting firms for whatever type of work that they need, and you're paying top dollar. Well, if someone like yourself is consulting for and is recently consulted for the Exxons of the world and the large corporations, you're able to see things that a small to medium-sized business may not ever get that type of advice, because they're not able to even afford that level of consulting. So I love when I hear that. It's not often, because most of the time people that consult for small to medium-sized businesses, that's the world they live in, and I love when you're able to bring some of those larger company concepts. So what do you feel is one example of something that you've been able to draw from your consulting with a larger firm, but then translate that for small to medium sized firm into what they can implement?
Well, I think what's really interesting is even when you go to work for and help a large company like an Exxon, it's funny, they seem to have some of the same problems that the small business has. So
sure.
It doesn't matter the size. When I first went into Exxon, I went in to help them do some documentation and improve some of their processes and systems, but found that the department I was working with, they didn't even have metrics. So I helped them set up key performance indicators and work on some strategic planning, and I did some business assessments for them. So I found this particular division, even though it was a large corporation, part of a large corporation, still didn't have what I consider kind of basic business building blocks in place. And so it really doesn't seem to matter what size of the company is. They all need to go back to the basics, kind of like the Vince Lombardi rule, this is a football.
Blocking and tackling.
Yeah.
I've used that so many times. And, whether you're a football enthusiast or not, the concept still remains. and I've heard a lot of consultants say, you go into these big companies and wow, even just the little things that you would think that they would have down pat, they don't. And the good news is it doesn't take much to make some pretty dramatic changes, because with let's even say a medium-sized company, the SBA calls a small business anyone with 500 employees or less. Well, that's a pretty big business. But, someone with 10, 15 employees, that's a small to medium-sized business, and they're trucking right along doing some nice things. But you can come in and go, you know what? I've assessed some things, and if we can do X, Y, and Z, they're not dramatic changes, but boy, we're going to get a big lift. Can you tell me a couple examples of things? Not even, I do want to pick your brain on your expertise, which is some turnaround, but even just some optimization. What are some things you normally see that you watch for right off the bat?
Well, the first thing I look at is metrics and try to see, do they have good key performance indicators, and they're looking at some of those basics. But a good example, one of my first consulting clients I went into was a warehouse that they did what they call pick and pull. They would get an order and they'd go get a dolly and go grab stuff off the shelf and everything. But they had no metrics, and they didn't have any idea how their performance was. And so I helped them develop a system where it was a really simple formula. We just divided how many picks and pulls they did a day against the number of hours, and we developed a metric. And I just had them put that number on the board every day, and then have a little huddle the next morning and say, okay, how did we do yesterday? And what was amazing is within a month, they had a 28% increase. And when I was only with them about three months. At the end of the time I was working with them, they were already up to a 32% increase in performance. And it's all because they now had a number to shoot for. It's all like the analogy of, would you go watch a basketball game if nobody kept score and there was no basket? They finally had something to shoot for, and had a dramatic increase in performance. And I see that in a lot of companies I go into. We start looking at some metrics and have people measured on performance and see dramatic improvements very quickly.
Yeah, I love that. And the other thing is the consistent huddles, the meetings, the daily, and you think, oh, we'll do that in our monthly or our weekly. Well, boy, what gets measured gets done. And when you can have those wins and those quick little meetings, that it keeps you on course, right? Because I was at a meeting yesterday, and the presenter made an interesting comment. It doesn't take you much to get off course. Even just a half degree off course isn't seeming like much, but over time, you are way off course.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Hey, so tell me a little bit. I know that you focus on the turnaround aspect of working with businesses and helping them turn around. If I would like, keeping up with their analogy, the frog in the water, you turn it up slowly and slowly they'll boil, right? So I would suspect that there's some businesses that don't even know right now they're in need of a potential turnaround. So what are some red flags? What are some things that they can watch for to go, ooh, we're kind of in the section here where we might need to do something before a true turnaround is needed?
Well, in most cases, when you ask any business owner or leader if they're happy with every area of their business, they're always going to point to a certain area that they're not performing the way they know they should. So in most cases, they have a general idea of where they have a weakness. But if a company that's in a turnaround situation almost always has some sort of a cash flow issue. That's one of the big things to point out. They've gone for maybe months without having the kind of profit that they need to have. I've even seen cases where the owner's gone 6 months without even being able to take a salary because cash flow is so tight. Yeah. It also affects the morale, and they're hitting burnout, and they're just the business leader or owner who goes home and with nightmares, about things are just in chaos and they're out of control. What am I going to do? When they go home with those kind of feelings, that's a perfect situation where you need to look at some turnaround, some transformation strategies, and to get a handle on your business so you don't go home feeling that way every night.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's really, really good. That's and you need to be present and aware so that you actually realize that that's the case. You might just think, well, that's just the way it is. It's the business world we're in, but maybe that's not the way that it should be or could be. So let's think about and talk about for a few minutes here, what are some ways that you would come in and start implementing a turnaround strategy? What are some things that if a business is in need of this, what would they expect from you to start with and to be prepared for so that they can start seeing some of those results?
Well, the main thing I do, and I think this is where anybody should start, whether you bring in somebody like myself or you're trying to do your own turnaround, it starts with an assessment. It starts with knowing where your business really is right now. And as business owners and leaders, we sometimes have our blinders on. We sometimes, the old saying, can't see the forest for the trees. We're so close to it. We've made so many decisions and maybe made some wrong decisions along the way that we just can't see it. And that's where a third party coming in, and of course, that may seem like I'm trying to push myself there, but really a third party has the ability to come in and see it from a new perspective that the average business leader is just too close to it. And I gave a speech not too long ago where the first thing I talked about, I told the audience, and they were almost all business owners there, I said, your business is full of liars. And they kind of were shocked. And I said, the first liar is you. And because what I meant by that is we kind of lie to ourselves. I've been there myself many times where I just kind of either don't want to see the truth or I've buried in the problems or so close to it, I can't see it. And that's where either bringing in a consultant or having a coach or someone to help you kind of see it from a outsider's perspective is really a good strategy. And then, and I also told them in that same speech that your employees are liars. And what I mean by that is you probably, as a business leader, haven't created a culture where the employees feel very comfortable coming and sharing where the challenges, or we call it challenges, but the real world is problems. They don't want to come to you with problems, and they feel like, that if I let you know all the problems I'm having, well, you may jeopardize my job. And so we have to build a culture where employees feel empowered to say, here's some things and struggles and things that's going on. And so they can be out there where we can start working on them and improve it. And so we have to kind of build that culture when it comes to employees. I like, the idea of, I think it's, who was it? It was the author of Principles, Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio said, that he wanted to create a culture of radical truth and radical transparency, and that's what I think we have to try to get to. And then one of the last things I mentioned in that particular speech was that I think our metrics lie to us a lot in business. We, especially in the small businesses I go into, sometimes they may or may not have a monthly profit and loss statement, but that may be the only thing they look at to tell how they're doing. And as P&L a month and a half after the fact is really rear view mirror looking, and it's not really telling them what's really going on in the organization. So that's kind of one of the first things we do is, okay, what are the numbers that we could look at daily, weekly, monthly that really give us an early indication of what's truly going on in your business? And I like this. You probably know who Frank Carney is. He and his brother Dan started Pizza Hut and happened to be in my hometown. Well, years ago when I had my first business, I heard him give a speech, and this is paraphrased, but he said, if you don't know at the end of every day whether you made money or lost money, then you don't know how to manage your business. And I thought, oh, wow, that really hit me right between the eyes, because I really didn't. I was relying on P&Ls, and by the time I saw a P&L, I had no idea where I was, and I had these ups and downs of profit and loss, and I could have profit 3 months or 6 months in a row, and one bad month is all it took to wipe out all that. Anyway, it was just a roller coaster. And so I set out to create a system where I knew every day whether or not I made a profit or not. And I know it's kind of hard to do, but in most businesses you can actually do that and figure out where you're at. And that helps you be much more proactive of, hey, sure, I need to make some changes right now.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that, knowing the numbers sounds cliche, but knowing what numbers that you need to shoot for yourself. And it makes me think of the businesses that, you hear this age-old story, hey, we had a great year. Look at all this revenue. Well, that's wonderful, but guess what? Look at all the expenses, and what's the true bottom line? So, right, having $1 million in revenue is wonderful, but if you had $1.1 million in expenses, oops. Or if you had 999, the bottom line is people think I'm looking at my numbers, but they're not looking at the right way. And I know for me, I don't do numbers well. So you need to know if that's the case with you. You need to get someone that can help you with that. And so that kind of brings me to my last point, which I want to ask you about your book. You wrote a book called The Business Turnaround Blueprint. So we've been talking about you coming in and helping businesses. Well, let's talk about your book, because this could help some businesses right now before having to bring someone in, and it might even help prevent them from needing a turnaround if you are able to read The Business Turnaround Blueprint. Yeah, the principles in my book, Business Turnaround Blueprint, are kind of the same as what I talk about in transformation, or even my first book was about preparing a business for sale, to sell your business for a higher amount or for a premium price. And the principles are all the same. I just, in this book, kind of put it from a turnaround perspective and making sure that the business owner or leader focuses on, cash flow first, getting their employees on board in the turnaround process, and getting those metrics in place, and all those, it's really back to the basics of running a good business. And that's kind of what I cover in the book. And the reason I wrote the book was really just because I had such a major failure in my life, and I have a heart for business owners. I had a business that, after I sold my first business, I started another business, and it really was out of my comfort zone. And after a year, it failed, and I lost everything. And not only did it just tear me up financially, but it was devastating to me emotionally. And it really was just the most humiliating experience of my life. It took a long time to get my self-esteem back from that devastating blow. But it kind of gave me, though, a heart for the small business owner, especially the ones that are struggling, because I've been there. I know what that feels like, and that's kind of why I wrote the book. And the SBA says that, we lose 3 million businesses, fail every year. And I kind of look at that. I know that's a big number, and, statistics kind of can be cold, but that's 342 businesses that close every hour, and that's and of those, about 20% or so of them have employees. So there's a lot of solopreneurs in that list, but 72 of them in that hour had employees that they had to say, "I'm sorry, we don't have a job for you anymore." You can kind of get it down to where this, it can be very personal, and it's a tragedy. And I think if we get business leaders doing back to the basics and doing the right things early, we can avoid a lot of the failures that are happening in our country and in business today. Awesome. I really agree with that, and I would love to encourage our listeners to go and pick up a copy of your book. So let's close with, how can people find you online, as well as pick up a copy of your book?
Yep. To learn more about me, just go to fredherbert.com. That's Fred, H-E-R-B-E-R-T. Sometimes people miss that, one of those R's there, .com. And then both of my books are on Amazon. Business Turnaround Blueprint became an Amazon bestseller, and I was very proud of that. And then Business for Sale Blueprint has been available for a few years, and that's for those business owners who are wanting to sell their business.
Excellent. Well, Fred, thank you for taking time to stop by today. It was wonderful chatting with you, and I wish you all the best.
All right. I appreciate it, Mike. Thanks.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.